Our story starts with an out-of-body experience. A young boy around the age of adolescence wakes up in a world very different from his own. It's so strange it can only be a dream. The name of the world was Earth, and people spent their time doing unproductive things. The person who the young boy was drawn to was playing an RPG. He had no idea why he knew what an RPG was. For some reason, this information was just in his head. The young boy couldn't understand how someone could spend so much time, hundreds if not thousands of hours, doing something that was merely entertainment. And the worst part about it was that this person wasn't even good at the RPG. He died over and over. But no matter how many times he died, he kept coming back. His name was Yeobanmin. He seemed to have died from all sorts of things. A landmine, for instance. The time before that was a poison arrow. He also died from being in places he shouldn't have, fighting things that were way beyond his reach. He'd been killed from just minding his own business, to being sprayed by poison from a dungeon treasure chest. He was commonly slaughtered by monsters, and even friendly fire. He didn't seem to be very wise. He once ended up as a member of an evil organization. He was killed over a simple argument, or by simply tripping and bumping his head. All of these deaths started to sound familiar to the adolescents. The worst was when he accidentally drank someone else's poison. It's absurd to think all these deaths happened to one person in the video game. The RPG was known as Demon War 3, Dungeon City Sheetan's Deep Darkness. It seems survival was the whole point of this part of the game. Everything revolved around the survival of the side character Evan de Sheetan. The adolescent seemed upset by hearing this name. The name Evan de Sheetan rung in his head. It seems as if the deaths were a running joke by the developers. A side story where the developers of this game made sure Evan de Sheetan died often in various situations. The main character of the story didn't die hardly as much. There seemed to be tons of rumors out there about the character Evan. Rumors like Evan's death was important to the character progression of the main character, or that the whole world was in on the deaths of Evan, or even that he was the failed clone of the Demon King. The deaths of Evan was very popular among certain people. There were even fan groups dedicated to Evan de Sheetan. The adolescent stared on, shocked by such nonsense. People see it as a challenge to try to keep Evan alive. Yeobanmin was one of those people. Evan de Sheetan level 23. Stamina 120. Combat skills 94. The in-game card of Evan de Sheetan had a striking resemblance to the young boy standing over Yeobanmin's shoulder. The adolescent was perplexed. How could this be his story? Maids rushed into the room, worried for the safety of the young Evan de Sheetan. He was sitting up in his bed, looking as lost as can be. He was asking questions like, "Where am I? Why am I here?" The two maids were worried that their young master had had a nightmare. But he continued on as if he wasn't himself. They informed him that he was the second son of the Marquis Shenton. His name was Evan de Sheetan. And with that, the memories came flooding in. Way too many memories for his brain to hold. It turns out what he believed to be a dream was real. The life memories of two people rolled around his head. The reflection of Yeobanmin stared back at him from the mirror. For some reason, the memories from the regular guy on Earth had returned with him after his dream. Yeobanmin stared into the mirror, shocked that he was a 9-year-old Evan de Sheetan. And worst of all, this was the world from Demon War 3. He trembled in the mirror as despair set in. The most important part about being Evan de Sheetan was that he would eventually die from the most pitiful deaths. He couldn't live a normal everyday life, for he died regularly. There was no way Yeobanmin could accept this outcome. But turns out Yeo did just that. He had no idea why this happened or if his memories were real. All he knew is he would become the extra that didn't die. Good luck with that. To think this would be the last time he fell asleep at his keyboard. At this very moment, his consciousness was being sucked away to another world filled with dangers and perils he's only faced in a video game. Yeobanmin had progressed so far on Evan. He would finally beat the Demon King. Bloody thoughts ranged in his head as he got so close to his ultimate goal. Do you really think you will be able to survive? Yeo was scared. What in the world is going on? Why was this happening? He was just playing his normal video game. The demon lord stabbed him in the chest as he sat at his computer. Your fate is to die. You'll never survive. Yeo had no idea what was going on. Was he really going to die from playing a video game? He realized all this was happening because he was Evan Dishiatan. He jumped awake in his bed in the world of Demon War 3. He wondered whether that was really only just a dream. These hallucinations were probably because he had awakened memories from a past life. Even so, this young body didn't resonate with him. He had to come to terms that this was real. He was Evan Dishiatan from the Dungeon City. Yeo Banmin was not his identity. He had to prepare for the deaths that would surely come. He'd like to believe that things would be different, but he was a realist. This world was the same in every way. Evan Yeo had an advantage. He wasn't just a young 9-year-old son of the Marquis. He had 29 years of memories in his head. He would organize those memories, and they would be the key to his victory. He stored all his information in a magical notebook that only he would be able to read, known as a free record in video games. Yeo Banmin was only 16 when he first heard about the video game Demon Wars. He was hooked from the first game, which he managed to complete in under 4 hours. Whenever a new game in the series was released, he consumed it in the blink of an eye. That was up until they released the groundbreaking Demon War 3. It was an open world with several endings. It even had a harem ending, which he was never able to achieve. Other than that elusive ending, there was only one true ending that eluded him. The side character, the second son of the Marquis, owner of the Dungeon City, always died in his pursuit to kill the Demon Lord. That's when Yeo became attached to the character. It was his fate to complete this, no matter how many times he had to restart. He put all his time into finding a way to get this true ending. Evan Yeo was shocked at the stupidity of his character. He died from such obvious traps. He was a sorcerer. His job was to stay safe at the back of the group. But for some reason he always found a way to take a blade to the chest. It was probably a curse that he was born handsome. His luck with women was terrible. He constantly ran into the obsessive, sycophantic, psychopathic types. Death was a common outcome for Evan Dishiatan in relationships. Even if he enjoyed some of the scenarios he was put in. Other than women, he had a fondness for finding poison where he shouldn't. And his hero complex was so big that he constantly thought he should protect the main character from death. There was over 5 endings where he threw his life away to save the main character. The loser sorcerer should not be taking a blade to the chest for the warrior. Poison. Assassination. Slipping. All it was death, death, death. Once, he even committed suicide after being dumped by his fiancée. The use of the free record was seriously backfiring on Evan Yeo. But there was hope. The last death that he could remember was in the fight against the Demon Lord. He had saved the life of the main character and was cursed in his stead. This meant that Yeo had kept Evan alive long enough to progress to the final scene. If Evan Yeo played his cards right, there was a chance he may survive. Evan Yeo startled a young maid, causing her to spill his meal. She was so familiar to him. It only took him a second to remember that she was Mabel. And that one day, she would grow into a beautiful woman who would be on the list of people who would kill him. Although there was a high chance that it was his fault in the first place. But she still was one of the females to kill him. Okay, it's most definitely his fault for ignoring her feelings towards him, but what could you expect? He had women throwing themselves at him. As she left to replace his food, he knew this was the world mocking his attempt at survival. He focused his thoughts. He was neither the main character nor the player. He was just an extra character, Evan Dishiatan. And he would not die. It was time for him to begin down his path of survival. The realm in which we find ourselves is one with legendary labyrinths and dangerous beasts abound. To confront these threats, knights dedicated themselves to mastering the art of swordplay, while magicians commanded awe-inspiring incantations. Yet, all of this occurred within the confines of a game world. There is only one surefire way for him to begin his journey. Evan Dishyatin had to level up. To simplify things, your level was your rank in life. To magicians, this increased your mana capacity, while warriors became stronger as their level increased. Evan Yeo was so wrapped up in his plotting that he failed to realize that his internal monologue had slipped into the real world. Mabel was frightened by the idea of him going to the dungeons. His mother would be heartbroken if she found out his plans. He tried to explain to her that he was only thinking out loud, but she forbade this even in his dreams. She informed him that when he grew up, it would be his duty to enter dungeons. But he wasn't allowed to go now, and that was final. But it turned out this was all a plan for Evan Yeo to confirm a suspicion he had. He already suspected, seeing as he had 9 years of life memories in his possession. But upon hearing the word level slipped from his lips, Maple's first thoughts were dungeon. This proved that people of this world had a flaw in their knowledge of the world's inner workings. People of this world believe that you only became stronger through tolling in the dungeon. This was a common misunderstanding. Of course, leveling up in a dungeon was like the equivalent of a blessing from God. Each time you leveled up, you became stronger, and your chance of survival increased. Rumors spread far and wide when dungeons first appeared, giving dungeons a bad rep in this world. But when the knowledge of the vast wealth you could attain hit the public, this opinion swiftly changed, which led to the death of countless citizens as they rushed to obtain these spoils. The kingdom was forced to come up with a plan that protected the populace. This plan revolved around nobles managing the dungeons on the behalf of the kingdom, leading to the creation of dungeon cities. And Evan Dishyatin was the successor to this particular dungeon city, for his father was none other than the Marquis Solane Dishyatin. This would afford him unparalleled access to the dungeon. But none of that was relevant at the moment. In reality, there were other ways to raise your level outside the dungeons. Evan Yeo would use these methods honed over years of playing Demon War to increase his odds of survival. Evan Yeo was caught by Mabel monologuing aloud again. Without realizing it, he used his charms to soothe her wearies. He instantly realized this was a dangerous path to tread. In the future, he would have to be more careful about using his God-given charms when it came to the opposite sex. Dating was 100% off limits if he wanted to avoid triggering a death flag. He had succeeded in determining how people perceived the concept of levels in this world. This was a crucial step in his journey to survival. The first of many immortality projects, leveling up. He set his plans into action by asking Mabel when his birthday was. To his surprise, it was not far off. But it was still too far away. What he needed right now. He ordered Mabel to set him up a meeting with his father. His father had an item that would be crucial to his plans. The first item ever obtained in the Shurden dungeon was given to his family in the past. At the moment, all it was doing was collecting dust in storage. Because of this, no one had any idea what special abilities it possessed. But things wouldn't be as easy as he first planned. He forgot an event to activate the artifact was soon to happen in the world. And such an event only triggered pure trauma in his heart. Back when Yeo Banman playing as the extra character Evan Dishyatin first came across the necklace. He forced mana into the necklace, causing hundreds, no thousands of slimes to attack him. The slimes were normal level 1 slimes. But Yeo had no idea how to deactivate the necklace, causing him to be killed in the most undignified way. The event was so shocking that it made front page of the Demon War community channel. And to think this was an endgame item, what use did a player have with such an effect? However, by happenstance Yeo stumbled across a small morsel of critical information. While completing the event on his main character, he killed a slime to save Evan and noticed one small line of text in the system's notification system. You have gained 1 EXP. That's right, a single experience point. But this EXP wouldn't raise your dungeon level. The XP was used on a different system entirely, known as the existence system. In the world of games, all actions yield results. And in games you would call that gain experience. It didn't matter whether you hunted monsters or trained a skill. You would be able to gain experience by repeating these actions. The people of this world believe this to be developing proficiency in those tasks. But they are wrong. In truth, you're gaining experience and growing by leveling up your existence. When Yeo Banmin was a player, he could examine his dungeon level as well as his existence level. The difference in the growth of the two levels was easy to spot. Your dungeon level spiked heavily when you leveled up. But you wouldn't see spikes with existence level. It was a slow and steady climb. Its growth depended heavily on talent. But there was a peculiarity that only pertained to existence level. And that was, it had no limits. Mabel returned with news that his father would see him immediately. Because of existence level, Yeo Banmin was able to grow even the feeble character Evan de Chiatin. His title laborer allowed him access to this growth. The typical job of a laborer was to hunt. But because Evan was so young, hunting was entirely out of the question. But there were some particular creatures who were weak enough that even a child could kill. Mirasol's necklace. Consume 1 MP to summon a level 1 slime. A level 1 character in Demon War 3 always started off with 100 MP and 100 HP. This would allow Evan to summon 100 slimes. He would most definitely have to use other options to attain more mana. And the experience gains from killing slimes was almost worthless. But if he put the effort in, a slow and steady climb from his young age would be worth its weight in gold. The handmaid announced his presence to his father. The whole encounter was entirely too formal. But as it turns out, his father totally enjoyed his presence. His father's exhaustion seeped away at him merely being in his presence. Evan Yeo would use his charms as the precious second son of the Marquis to obtain what he was after. He wasted no time asking his father if he could obtain his birthday presents a few days earlier. He shocked his father when he asked for a necklace. But his father's shock truly went through the roof when he deduced what necklace his son was speaking of. Evan described the necklace appearance to his father. His father reminded him that the family heirloom was not something that could just be taken out thoughtlessly. Evan Yeo had prepared for this outcome. And he intensified his talents tenfold. Bros, that attack would 100% work on me. A normal son would probably be punched in the face if he used such an attack on his father. But the talents Evan had at his disposal was next level powerful. This put his father in a peculiar situation. His son had never pleaded for anything in his life. But the necklace in question was a family heirloom. The only explanation for this was that the artifact must have chosen Evan as his owner. Because of this, his father had no qualms with giving in to Evan's wishes. But he insisted there were conditions that Evan would have to keep in mind. There is a limit to the number of artifacts you are able to equip. In the realm Evan Yeo ventured into, a unique rule governed the use of powerful artifacts. One could only equip a maximum of 5. This limitation stemmed from the innate capacity of the human body to endure the potent forces imbued within these magical relics. From swords to rings to necklaces, a diverse array of artifacts existed, each possessing its own enchantments. Nevertheless, the boundary remained steadfast, restricting individuals from harnessing more than 5 artifacts simultaneously. It was an intrinsic part of the game's setting, acknowledging the physical limitations of mortal beings and their inability to bear a greater surge of mystical energies. His father insisted that as he got older, other artifacts would become more enticing to him. He needed to promise when that time came, he would return the heirloom to the family storage. Evan Yeo had no problems with this condition. Killing slimes would only take you so far. He realized that it would be a little tricky for him to figure out how much experience points he had gained by that time, seeing as how he had no status window. But he'd cross that bridge when he came to it. His father had no regrets about his decision upon seeing the joy his son radiated upon receiving the Mirasol's necklace. Yeo Banmin almost made his original mistake with the necklace by carelessly equipping it. It was vital that he bring the artifact under his control before activating it. Evan Yeo pushed forward. He was not the careless gamer he was back then. He knew all he needed to know about the artifact to safely equip it. There was a chant that cost him his life. One that he could never forget. He stepped forward with the necklace held firmly in one hand, and the other hand opened facing upwards. Larpshigo Harug Bajangjulo Mirasol. He took a deep breath and prepared to finish the second verse of the chant. Larpigoda Mousadanglo Mirasol. This chant will lead him on the path to save Evans. He abruptly realized that it was his life he was out to save this time. Come out! Slime! They look alike, but they also don't. You know what they say if you feed them long enough. The connection between him and the artifact was established. All that was left for him to do would be to send a flow of mana into Mirasol's necklace. A tiny cute slime appeared in his hand. Cute. To think he will be killing something so cute. The adorable little slime initiated the first attack. Q. The little slime released a stream of acid poison into his hand. He wouldn't fall for this level of deception. He immediately slaughtered the creature in his hand. In Demon War, critical condition was the name of the state where your health dropped to a low level. In this state, one could perform a move known as Final Hit to finish off the enemy. This move was affectionately known by the player base as Final One Hit Fu. The first piece to the puzzle to save his life was finally complete. He spent all his time killing slimes. At his current level, it took exactly 11 seconds to slaughter one. This was entirely too slow. But he had no choice but to persist. The slime training experience would stack and one day make him powerful. Because it took so much effort, he practiced at all times of the day. At dinner, he killed slimes. As he casually walked through the halls of the residence, he killed slimes. While taking a poo, he killed slimes. Slime training was taxing on the body. While it may look simple, it used up stamina and mana. And a small 9-year-old body could only take so much. If he pushed too hard, there were consequences he would have to face. You got chills when your stamina fell below 50%. And below 30%, you broke out in a cold sweat. When those symptoms appeared, he would have to back off of training a little. But for now, it was full steam ahead. It was important that he kept his stamina and mana above 30% to keep from being an easy target. The system would take advantage of those situations and trigger death flags in his direction, at an alarming rate. All of the training was beginning to pay off. Evan Yeo knew he shouldn't be seeing a noticeable difference so soon. He missed having access to a stat window. It would make his life so much simpler. He pondered what caused this to happen. There was a chance he gained a skill from the repetitive actions of squeezing the life out of the slime. There was no way he got a skill from simply closing his fist. When he used mana, he most definitely felt a squeeze in his heart as it depleted. But he realized he didn't experience any symptoms when he used stamina. The only cause for this would be a growth multiplier to stamina. He was shocked, but it made perfect sense. His character stamina limits were much higher than his mana limit. This meant that he had been doing everything wrong all these years. With the stamina multiplier, he should not have wasted his time on the sorcerer class. Mabel rushed in as he screamed in frustration. He asked her to give him some space as depression consumed him. He cursed the names of the developers of the game. This proved they were out to kill Evan at any cost. But he wouldn't take this line down. He would need to create a strict training regime for Evan moving forward. It was important he strengthened his body. He will level up through slime training, and the rest of his time will be spent on weight training. When he was done, he would be able to build a world-building book from his successes. He would have no trouble writing such a book. He knew all the treasures hidden throughout the world. He knew the importance of every creature that lived in this world. He had cleared the game countless times and he remembered every second of it. He would use his knowledge to avoid the things that he needed to avoid. But he had to be careful since he reincarnated as Evan. Some things were bound to be different than in the game. It was important he prepared for those situations also. He'd compare the differences between the story he knew and what actually happened to predict the future. He would do whatever it took to avoid the wave of death that was heading in his direction. He knew one of those waves graced his presence on a daily basis. Caution was of the utmost importance. Evan Yeo's daily routine was all planned out. He would wake up, shower, train, study. Write his world guide. Shower, break, and then sleep. His training methods would combine knowledge from the game and the real world. His world guide was important to analyze the world and prepare for his future. He would become strong at all costs. Evan Yeo began his training immediately. Mabel was worried for Evan's well-being. She brought up her concerns to the other housemaids. He had started locking himself away from her. He was most definitely hiding something. This hurt her feelings because he previously treated her as a friend. The older male maid reminded her that nothing good ever came out of crossing the line between masters and servants. The other young maid felt her life had only become easier lately. The childish Evan she once knew was gone. He had been performing some sort of weird exercises in the backyard. And lately, he had been constantly flinching and relaxing his fist. The older maid ordered them to leave him be. Children would be children. None of this eased Mabel's worries. She burst out crying, worried about the changes everyone noticed in her master. The other maids were sure Mabel was going to get them fired. A shiny-headed maid burst into the room. He informed them that Evan was out in the garden lifting boulders over his head. There was no way this could be true. The maid was most definitely seeing things. He admitted to exaggerating. But the rock Evan was lifting was much heavier than a child his age should be able to handle. When he asked Evan why he was doing this, Evan replied that it was the replacement for a dumbbell. Do any of you know what a dumbbell is? The other maids restrained Mabel as she tried to rush to her master's side. Great reflexes. We have to keep her away from him in this state. There was a good chance that shiny-head maid was just seeing things. Mabel continued to struggle for her freedom. On a really nice day, Evan had tea time with a sophisticated-looking young woman. She's highly likely his mother. She inquired on whether he felt the snacks were delicious. She insisted he eat up. The snacks were imported from the magical kingdom. The young lady turned out to be Evan's never-aging mother. The Marquis Sheridan's first wife, Redindy Sheridan, asked her son why he had been avoiding tea time with her lately. Yeo Banman always harbored the feeling that she appeared too youthful to be married. Whispers circulated, suggesting that her perpetual youthful visage was a consequence of a graphic designer abruptly vanishing during the development of her image. He explained to his mother that he had been searching for artifacts lately, and the rest of his spare time was spent exercising to improve his health. His mother asked him if the necklace he acquired from his father was the artifact he was referring to. He admitted it was one and the same. She believed exercise to be totally random for a young man who had dreams to be a great mage. He proceeded to break it to her easily. She picked up on what he was putting down right away. She was impressed. Her 9-year-old son was talking like a man. She encouraged him to do whatever he wanted. Since he only had a year before he became insanely busy, nobility lessons will start in earnest when he turned 10 years old. He would need to learn the history of nobles, language, math, geography, swordsmanship, and magic. There was various knowledge he would need to gain, that the level of his status required. And those lessons will begin the moment he turns 10. Evan Yeo didn't know how he let that slip his mind. You'll need to learn all the things befitting your station in life. It's important you have the tools to assist your brother as he becomes the Marquis in the future. He impressed her with his knowledge of the responsibilities of the nobles. It was important that a noble perform to a certain expectation when entering the dungeon. He would never forget that knowledge. It was one of the reasons he died a horrible death. He reassured his mother that he would be ready when the time came. She thought it would be a good idea for the two of them to visit the dungeon city. Because of the dungeon's recent reverse flow, it was in a state of flux at the moment. Evan had 1 year of training before his time would be consumed with tedious tasks. The second phase would have to begin immediately. Evan Yeo needed to find the character that was suitable for Phase 2. Immortality Project Number 2. He studied his world guide to find the right individual. As he flipped through his world guide, he was sure he had written in detail the best way to accomplish his goals. Venom Spear wouldn't do. Blood Witch would work. She was strong and pretty, but he had no idea where she was. Her presence also scared him, so that was out of the question. He found exactly who he was looking for. Silent Knight. Silent Knight was a character who was very similar to Evan. He's one of the strongest characters in Demon War 3. He's second only to the main protagonist of the game, an assassin who wielded twin daggers. He had the ability to fade into the darkness and kill monsters. The fates of demigods were truly unfortunate. And it was no different for Silent Knight. Evan Yeo would do his best to change their fate, not only for him, but for the demigods alike. When he was 9 years old, he lost his parents and a large-scale reverse flow. Most likely the one that recently happened in the city. He was sold to foreign mercenaries, causing him to suffer a ton. Later in life, he entered the dungeon and activated his abilities. It seemed that maybe things was going in Evan's favor. This might be the perfect time to attain Silent Knight before tragedy struck him. His trip to the city with his mother wouldn't be soon enough. The strongest demigod assassin, and one of the top 5 ranking characters in Demon War 3, should be right here in the dungeon city Shurden. Evan Yeo hoped Silent Knight could hold on just a little longer, for Evan would do his best to change both their fates. Evan Yeo ordered Mabel to prepare immediately for a grand shopping trip. As the Marques's carriage headed to the city, Mabel wondered what had happened. Why had he suddenly chosen her to accompany him on the shopping trip? He hasn't shown a single bit of interest in her in quite some time. I think if Evan's not careful he will avoid a dagger in the gut. But instead, he's going to get it in the back. Mabel would make sure this trip was perfect for Evan, in hopes that she'd show him how much she cared. She inquired about what he was looking to purchase. He was totally straight with her. He was looking for a person. The words that came out of his mouth didn't align with the image in her head. A person? Evan Yeo smiled out the window. The two of them was headed straight for the slave markets. Earlier, it turned out the shiny-headed maid was not seeing things. The young Marquis was most definitely lifting a boulder over his head. The dungeon city was empty. The only citizens in sight were all injured. The reverse flow of the dungeon had had a massive toll on the citizens of the city. Every once in a while, the dungeon will reverse its flow and all its monsters will come pouring out into the city. During this time, the city suffers massive amounts of damage. So it's highly likely Evan Yeo may not be able to find who he was looking for. And the worst part is that the city was still in a dangerous state. Some monsters were still out and about. The search for them had not fully concluded. Now was not the best time to be shopping, but Evan had no choice. It was now or never. Sooner or later, the population of the city would grow again and the mercenaries will make a trip through their location. If he missed this opportunity, it may be years before another opportunity arose to obtain Silent Knight. And by then, his fate would have been sealed. Mabel wanted to return home. She didn't feel it was dignified for a young Marquis to be out on the street at a time like this, trying to buy a slave. He reassured her that the establishment they were visiting was fully on the up and up. It was even recognized by the country. This market was established to facilitate a safe environment for the sale of a very particular type of merchandise. But where there was once corruption, there will always be corruption. In this world, the government runs the slave markets. The government had to step in and take over the slave market because the mistreatment of slaves had hit a fever pitch. Those complaints have since ceased under the control of the government. This didn't mean that the system was perfect. There were plenty of loopholes, and many who exploited those loopholes. Because of the suffering caused by the loopholes, those who suffered under these circumstances reported their evidence to the social system. And when a blind ear was turned to their plight, a revolt ensued. Among the individuals present, there stood a figure from the world of Demon War 3. She did not belong to any nation but was a young girl who had antagonized the entire world. Her presence was marked by the unleashing of formidable magic that left a trail of bloodshed in her wake. Though possessed of beauty, her nature was merciless, earning her the title of the Blood Witch among the people. There was no doubt that Evan died by her hands. But he still wondered where she was and what she was doing. She would be a young kid just like him at this time in her life. Evan, his maid and the escort knight of the Xiatan March, Dane, entered the slave market. The visit to such a place was totally out of character for the young master. When his escort inquired about his interests, Yahello distracted him with the silly ramblings of a child. But when Dane persisted, Yahello assured him that he knew how the world worked. This place is not a zoo, nor a place to brag about my riches. I'm here for the sole purpose to obtain people I need. Dane assured him that his father could obtain those people for him. But this was something Yahello had to do on his own. These people would be his companions for the rest of his life. The rumors about you seem to be true. I am truly touched, young master. The real reason was because everyone his father chose for him died along with him. And when those companions died, the CG of the game changed along with them. As the three marched forward, his two escorts both had the wrong idea about his visit. Mabel was afraid he was after pretty girls, and the young knight's logic went along the same lines. Everyone in this city knew who the young master was. He was instantly greeted upon entering the head seller's office. He got right to work. He asked for a merchandise that shouldn't exist. He wanted to see children his age. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He informed the seller that he knew they had orphans that had recently lost their parents, in their possession. They were all young children who had willingly sold themselves into slavery. If you call needing a meal in your belly and a roof over your head willingly, then I guess it's willingly. He informed Evan that these slaves wouldn't be suitable for the young master. Evan informed him that what he heard out of the slave seller's mouth was that these slaves would be desperate for survival and willing to work hard. Individuals in this state would be perfect for him. They all would grow together and put their lives on the line in the protection of one another. He informed the seller it was final and that he should just show them to him. As he waited patiently, all the young children's, excluding the ones younger than 12, was brought before him to examine. He instantly noticed their state. They were not in good health. Someone had been beating them. It was highly likely that the adults would lie about how they were being treated. The young silent knight was among them, his appearance striking even at a young age. But there was something better. A character who was ranked in the top 5. Someone infamous for her evil reputation. The Blood Witch was there also. His companions weren't impressed by any of the kids. But his mind was made up. He needed both of them. Their species was a unique concept in demon war. A species chosen by God, the demigod race. Emerging abruptly, they formed a distinct subspecies within the human race. In contrast to their human counterparts, their physical bodies were inherently weaker, and their growth unfolded at a sluggish pace. Consequently, they were often regarded as unfortunate anomalies. However, within their midst, a few individuals defied all expectations and rose to astounding levels of strength. Presently, the most renowned amongst them stood before him, the formidable representatives of the demigod race in the virtual realm of demon war. Among them were the infamous Blood Witch and the enigmatic Silent Knight. Yahello had just struck pay dirt. Eventually, through dungeon leveling, these two will become extremely strong and overcome their physical weakness. Demigods were known to receive double blessings upon leveling up in the dungeons. Their trajectory of strength skyrocketed the farther they headed down the path of dungeon leveling. They quickly reached a point where humans could never touch them. Because of their weakened state during adolescence, majority of them never entered the dungeon. And if they did, they would die before the 5th level. For every one demigod child that rose, a legion was ground up by the cogs of the dungeon. It was a terrible fate indeed. Yahello was determined to protect his 2 demigod companions. Evan was determined to pay a drastic sum for them when they were worth far less. He would not argue about what they were worth with a simple slave seller. And it really wasn't his problem what would happen to the slave seller for taking such a sum of money from a child of the Marquis family. Evan would be taking these 2 with him. On the ride back, Evan finally confronted Mabel about his problems with her. I want you to pretend you found a boyfriend. Yes. And that boyfriend cheated on you. Yes. Okay, in your hand is a knife. Do you stab your boyfriend? Yes. That right there, is exactly why I don't F with you. The story you just watched is called Never Die Extra. Let's show our appreciation and support for the creator of this manhwa and their incredible efforts. With over 50 chapters released so far, this video covered only the first 7 chapters. Be sure to continue reading to delve deeper into the story. If you haven't already, please subscribe to discover more amazing manhwas, manhwas, and mangas. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. In case part 2 of this video isn't recommended to you, rest assured that it will be available shortly. Meanwhile, why not enjoy this video from our collection?